Let me know when you're sorted, Amy.
It's just started, Chair, so you're good to go.
Okay. Right. Good afternoon, members. Welcome to this digital meeting of the Special Audit Committee being held via Microsoft Teams. Today, Monday, the 16th of November, 2020 at 2 p.m. Just to confirm that this meeting will be recorded and made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images, audios of those individuals present and or speaking will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council's website at www.caerphilly.gov.uk. If members lose connections during the meeting, could they please make every effort to reconnect? However, the meeting will continue as long as it's correct. Committee services staff are available and will be able to assist you to reconnect if necessary. I wish to also remind everyone that the Chair has the discretion to terminate or suspend recordings if, in my opinion, continuing to do so would prejudice the proceedings or that continued recording might infringe the rights of any individual. The Chair also has the right to remove persons from the remote meeting if that is necessary. Can I also remind members to please mute their microphones, but to leave their cameras on? Can I please ask that officers have their microphones and cameras turned off until they are invited to present their reports or speak on an item? Members and officers should only activate their microphone after the Chair has invited them to speak on an item. Today, in terms of voting on the agenda items, we'll be using Microsoft Forms. These forms are within the show conversation. There the voting will appear and then members are asked to click on yes, no, abstain, and then click submit votes. Before we start the agenda proper, I'd like to have a roll call to know exactly who's here. I've got Councillors Adams.
Here, Chair.
Aldsworth.
Present, Chair.
Bevan. J. Bevan. Cass.
Present, Chair.
Hardacre. Oh no, sorry, David has given his apologies. Mann.
Here, Chair.
Miles.
Yeah.
Parry.
Present.
Graham Simmons.
Here.
Julian Simmons.
Present, Chair.
Then we have Nigel Yates. Nigel?
Got to take the mic off. I'm here.
Okay. And from Grant Thornton, Grace Hawkins.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Barry Morris.
Hello, Chair.
Martin Royal.
Present, Chair.
Welcome all. And from the Wales Audit Office, Gareth Jones.
Chair, you didn't call my name.
Oh, didn't I? I apologise, June. I'm glad you're here though, because I can hear your voice. And officers, Edmonds.
Present, Chair.
Harris.
Present, Chair.
Roberts. Oh, apologies from Ross. Garanu.
Present, Chair. Present, Chair.
And Andrew Southcombe.
Present, Chair.
Thank you all very much. We'll move on to the agenda item proper now. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. The only apology we've had is from David, and no apologies from John Bevan, and everyone, and none we've had apologies from. So everyone else is here. That's good news. Welcome everyone. Declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and/or prejudicial interests in respect of any items of business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Can you use the hands up function if you do have a declaration? And Nigel will keep a note of those. Nigel, are there any declarations?
No declarations.
Thank you. Agenda item 3. Audit Committee assurances over management processes and arrangements. 70, there we are. The recommendation is on page 1 of the agenda pack, and 3.1 is for members of the Audit Committee are asked to note the responses appended to the report. Can I have someone to move, please? Can I have someone to move the report, please?
I'm prepared to move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mike.
Councillor Mike Adams.
A second.
Councillor Miles.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Chair, I did want to ask just a couple of questions on the report.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
On my first question was on page.
Fire away.
About 2/3 of the way down the page, the question is asked, what arrangements are in place to report fraud issues and risk to the Audit Committee? I note the answer there, that the internal audit manager is able to report investigations at any stage. I wondered though, under what circumstances would the audit manager actually bring a report to Audit Committee?
Now, Brenda, you have 2 questions here, do you?
Yeah, shall I give my second question?
Give the second question and I'll ask Steve to come in then.
Okay, the second question then was on page 4. And it's the 4th point down. Have there been any instances of non-compliance or suspected non-compliance with law and regulations? The answer given says that the Council was successfully judicially reviewed over its equality impact assessment on the decision to close the leisure centres. I believe that in fact the judicial review did find that the Council had failed to comply with the public sector equality duty. So I kind of question the accuracy of that answer and if that is correct, or am I misinformed?
Steve, could you come in here, please?
Yeah, if I just pick up the first question around the investigations, the Audit Committee could ask at any point for details in respect of ongoing investigations. In some of the management responses that have been given as part of the accounts closure process, we have alluded to the fact that there are 4 ongoing investigations as at the accounts date. 3 of these are in schools and 1 is in the Council's waste service. As I say, they are ongoing investigations currently, but it would be within your rights at the end of the investigations to ask for more details if you wish to do so. In terms of the judicial review, what's that acknowledging is that the Council was successfully judicially reviewed on its EIA in respect of the proposed closure of Pontefract Leisure Centre. So it's just acknowledging the fact that that did actually take place during the 2019-20 financial year.
But I am right in thinking that the judicial review did find the Council had failed in one of its duties. So
that's right. Yep.
Which doesn't appear to be reflected in the answer.
Just bear with me a sec while Yeah, it is saying the council was successfully judicially reviewed. So it did find in favour, obviously, of the person who brought that review.
Oh, right. I understand it now. So the judicial review found against the council, but it's being expressed in saying that the council was successful. Yes, I see what you mean. It's quite strangely written. I've got to be honest.
All right, point taken. But that's the intention of the wording.
Now.
Yeah.
The council
Steve, can I ask you a follow-on to Brenda's question? The reports, I'm sure we've asked in the past that when these 4 investigations are finished, you will bring them back to audit.
We can do that. Yes, I can liaise with Rob Tranter, obviously, and if you want to see reports on those investigations, then we can arrange for that to be done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chair, Councillor Simmons wants a question.
I've got Liz next. Is that correct, Nigel?
Yes, you are, yes.
Yeah. Graham,
Okay,
you're after
Chair.
Liz.
Yes, on the same really aspect as the last query. I mean, it's quite high up where it's mentioned about these 4 investigations, and then it kind of indicates that we're to look at the appendices 3 and 5, but I couldn't really identify any answers. So are you saying, Steve, that if we want further information with regards to those investigations, we can request it for next year?
Yeah, we can do that at any point if the committee requests it, but obviously as these are ongoing investigations, we would have to wait until they're concluded first. But what I can do, when each of these investigations is closed, I can let you know, and then if you wish for more details to come to the committee, we can arrange that for you.
Thank you. Graham Simmons, please.
Thank you. It's following on from Brenda's point. I've asked this question on, well, quite a number of occasions about costs of the leisure strategy, just identified from the strategy doc, or the document that came to scrutiny. On page 46, it gives a cost of £15 million for Caerphilly and between 5 and, from memory, £9 million for the refurbishments on the other 3 leisure centres. So we'll take the bottom figure. So there's £30 million of work identified, but I can't seem to get a definitive figure for the cost of the refurbishments and replacement in Caerphilly. As Steve has just said, that we can ask for this information. I would like a report on this to come to audit. Well, I'm sorry, I can see councillors shaking their heads, but it's immaterial, really. There's case law, I think it's called the Oldham decision, that as this decision was taken by Cabinet, there must be a funding stream identified to support the policy. So on that basis, and if only on that basis, I would like a report to come to audit, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Steve, may I ask when that is likely to be?
Can I just make a few points first of all? I mean, what we're talking about here is a strategy document. It's a statement of intent.
I see.
But any final decisions on any developments, refurbishments, new builds would be subject to further reports, which would include full up-to-date detailed costing. So as and when we are in a position to put proposals forward, reports will be done supported by costed business cases.
Could I ask you then, would that go through certain scrutinies then?
It would go through scrutiny committees before it goes to Cabinet for a decision, and in some cases, for example, if we were looking at potentially borrowing, it would need to go into full council for a decision.
Thank you. Graham, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I did actually read the legal judgment, and obviously I'm not legally qualified, but it does make reference to this Oldham decision. And if the strategy document was accepted by Cabinet and not council, then a funding stream needs to be identified. And I failed to find it. it's a minimum of £30 million. As Steve said, if borrowing is required, the database that I put forward was from zero. I accept that absolutely, based on Public Works Loan Board interest rates. But we're talking about the thick end of it, up to £50 million with replacement costs, interest, and the rest of it. So, if possible, I would like this cost analysis carried out, please, and brought back to the audit.
Can I come back in, Chair? I didn't say borrowing will be required. I said if borrowing is requirement, it would need to go to council. But I'll repeat again, what's been agreed by Cabinet is a strategy, a statement of intent. No financial resources have been committed at this point. And if we are to commit resources on the strategy moving forward, then as I said, there would be reports that would go through a scrutiny process into Cabinet, and if there was a borrowing requirement, onto council. So all members will be cited of any future proposals in relation to the leisure strategy.
Thank you very much, Steve.
So I guess we're talking £30 to £50 million without reference. Thank you.
Graham. Right. Who's next, Nigel?
Councillor Adams.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We've just had that nearly 10 minutes of protracted interrogation, all based on Councillor Simmons following up on Brenda Miles's question regarding the equality impact assessment on one judicial review. That seems a little bit over the top. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other questions, please? No? We'll go on to agenda item 4, sorry.
Sorry, Chair, you'll need to take a vote on the recommendation.
Oh,
Yes,
gosh,
I was going to suggest I'll second that if it wasn't seconded in the first
thank you very much.
motion.
Thank you. Right, we need to take a vote. Now, the vote is in this show conversation area. If everyone can, it's right next to the hands. Have the opportunity to vote for, against, or abstain, and then submit a vote.
Can I register my vote verbally, please? Nigel Yates is for.
Yes, thank you, Nigel.
Oh, there we go.
Amy, may I ask if everyone has voted?
Yes, Chair, sorry, I was just totting them up. Yeah, all including Nigel, yeah, and that's unanimous.
That's lovely, thank you very much.
Colin's got his hand up, Chair.
Yeah, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make the point, as an audit committee, we are here to ask questions, so I didn't object to the questions being asked.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to agenda item 4. Statements for 2019-2020. This will be presented by Grant Thornton, Barry Morris and Grace Hawkins and Martin Royal. Now, the recommendations are on number 3, which is 3.1, 3.11, 3.12 and 3.13. Move and second and to put the debate in order, and then we'll discuss it. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Mike. Chair. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Right, questions. Who's first, please, Nigel?
Chair, sorry, could I come in, please? Could we ask Barry Morris to present the report, and then I'd like to say something.
I've got this meeting.
If we take questions.
Front and upside down today. I'm awfully sorry.
and then we'll take questions after the two presentations, Chair.
Of course. Barry Morris, please.
Chair, thank you. So Grace and I will lead you through this
So
presentation.
sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's absolutely fine. So, Chair, we'll highlight some of the key messages from the ISO 260 report that you've got in front of you, and then obviously we're happy to take any questions. So, as we've set out there, our materiality is £6.4 million, and therefore we're reporting anything to you where there would be a change around that figure. As we've highlighted in the report, and as Steve has identified in the covering letter, the covering report, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact on this year's audit. We appreciate that finance officers have had to prepare the accounts remotely, and indeed many of their responsibilities have been diverted to supporting local businesses and residents in making sure that their needs are met. However, the audit was considerably protracted this year. It did produce a number of significant challenges, and I think, as you'll see from the findings that we've set out within this report, there have been a significant number of material adjustments that have been processed through the accounts. It should be, and whilst we haven't come to the final outcome yet, the audit has therefore taken significantly longer than it would have done in previous years. This is likely to result in significant fee increases, and we're in the current time discussing that with the Audit Wales office to determine the quantum of that, and that will then be discussed and agreed with your Director of Finance and will be reported hopefully to the meeting of the Council. Chair, you'll see in Exhibit 1 on page 13 that we've had to audit remotely or mainly remotely using Microsoft Teams and a whole range of different platforms. And there's been ever greater scrutiny around estimates that have been used by management, particularly around the valuations of property, plant and equipment, and around the pension liabilities as well, to make sure that those are appropriate. We did get agreement from officers that on 2 occasions we attended the Council's offices so that we could progress the audit in a more efficient manner. As we set out in paragraph 10, we do propose to issue an unqualified audit opinion on this year's accounts. However, the prior year accounts have had a number of prior period adjustments reported on them, and Grace will go through those in a moment. As we set out in paragraphs 14 and 15, there are 2 emphasis of matter which are included within the audit opinion. The first of those relate to the value of your land and buildings, both the council dwellings and the other operational properties as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The second relates to your share of the pension property funds held within the Greater Gwent Pension Fund. And again, the reason that those have arisen is as a result of the pandemic and the material valuation uncertainty. We then go on to talk about the significant risks in Exhibit 2 on page 15. And you'll see there that we've raised a recommendation around the journal control environment that you have in place. The second is around the rebuttable presumed risk around revenue recognition, and there are no matters to bring to your attention in that respect. On page 16, we then just go on to talk about the impact of COVID-19 and the valuation and the impact upon the valuation of land and property, and also on the pension fund liability. Chair, I'd now like to hand over to Grace, who will take you through some of the more material findings on the audit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair. So in Appendix 3, we set out the corrections that were made to the accounts. I'll pull out some of the more material areas. As Barry alluded to, there were some prior period adjustments too, and as a result of our triennial existence testing, we identified the Idris Davis primary school element of the Rumney Comprehensive had been double counted in the prior year, so it had been revalued, and also the spend of the new primary school had been included. So this was adjusted in the 18-19 comparatives. This also then had a knock-on impact in the 19-20 figures, with that roll forward being corrected. Another material adjustment that was made was in relation to the derecognition of capital expenditure in relation to the council dwellings. So this was a reclassification movement within the I&E statement to move it from the service expenditure to other comprehensive income, and to ensure the comparative was also could be compared to the 18-19, and this was also corrected. There are a number of other capital adjustments from review of the fixed asset register. This was mainly reclassifications between asset classes and also some revaluation movements that were adjusted. All of these impacted on material changes through the cash flow and reclassifications of non-cash items. However, this didn't have any impact on the cash balances of the council, and this was also corrected in 18-19 comparatives too. Appendix 4 outlines the prior year recommendations that were raised as part of our audit findings, and you'll see the 6 out of the 7 were not actioned in year and have been re-raised. The current year recommendations are outlined in Appendix 5. There were 22 recommendations raised as part of this year's audit, which is a significant increase on prior years. The majority of these have been accepted by management, and comments have been added. The 2 in relation to journals, which are the first 2 matters in Appendix 5, weren't accepted, as these have been raised in prior years and have been brought to audit committee previously. I don't propose to go through each of the recommendations in detail, but happy to take any questions on any individuals if you do have them. Thanks.
Chair, before I hand over to Steve to go through his section, I would just bring your attention to page 24. So this is part of the letter of representation to us. As Grace has set out, there have been a large number of adjustments that have been processed through the accounts as a result of the audit. There is one item that isn't being processed through the accounts, and that's for 1.2 million, which relates to an unidentified bad debt provision. Now, we have raised a recommendation in relation to this in previous years, and again, you'll see that that's one of those actions that hasn't been addressed within the year. What we're saying in this instance is that we were unable to gain sufficient evidence to be able to support that that bad debt provision was appropriate. Management have decided not to make that adjustment on the basis of materiality, as it is well below the materiality threshold, and we are satisfied that that adjustment is not made. Chair, happy for you now to pass over to Steve and then any questions.
Thank you both very much. Could you come in, Steve, please? Steve?
Yep, thank you, Chair. As Barry set out, you will appreciate clearly that it hasn't been a normal year with the audit of the annual accounts being conducted remotely. And this has presented us with many challenges, both for my staff in the corporate accountancy team and also for the audit team from Grant Thornton. There are, of course, many positives across the authority from flexible working, but this has presented many difficulties in accessing and sharing information on a virtual basis during the audit of the accounts. In terms of effectively engaging with the audit team, it's clearly much easier when face-to-face, where information can be easily shared and queries can be dealt with in a timely manner. This year, we also lost an experienced member of staff in March who dealt with more technical aspects of the accounts. We have appointed a replacement, but she has been on a very steep learning curve at a very difficult time. A further challenge, which Barry alluded to, has been the need to reprioritise workloads to deal with the impact of COVID-19. Under normal circumstances, staff will be fully focused on dealing with the audited accounts, but there have been several distractions this year. And a good example of this is staff dealing with the processing of business grants and the need to establish new systems and processes to ensure that these payments were made as quickly as possible. These challenges have inevitably led to delays, with the audit process taking longer than it would under normal circumstances. Appendix 3 of the report provides details of the misstatements identified during the audit process, which have subsequently been corrected by management, with the exception of the balance of 1.2 million that Barry just explained to you. It's important to stress that these adjustments have no impact on the 2019-20 provisional outturn position reported to Cabinet on the 1st of July or on our cash or general fund balances. However, members will note that there are several recommendations in the auditor's report arising from the audit of the financial statements. Most of these recommendations have been accepted by management, and I will now personally chair a project team that will ensure that all the recommendations in the report will be addressed by the end of the 2020-21 financial year. The first meeting of this team took place last week, and a further meeting has now been scheduled for the 23rd of November. Thank you, Chair. Happy to assist with any questions.
Okay, there is quite a few people asking. Mike, you'll have to join the queue.
Actually, Chair, it was just to take my name off the
I
queue,
see.
because the presentation that Grace just went through on Appendix 3 actually answered many of the questions that I may have. So thank you very much, Grace, for taking me off the list so early. Thanks.
Okay. Graham, you'll be added to the list, but who is first, please, Nigel?
Colin first. Colin, Councillor Mann.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, everyone. Obviously, we're it's on 5.3 on the page 6. It's about this 1.2 million. Obviously, I understand it's not material to the overall accounts in accountancy terms, but obviously 1.2 million is a lot of money in layman's terms, especially the people in this meeting, I would have thought. So it is, we're getting sort of different messages on it, and I do take on board what Steve said about how difficult it is, or it has been in the circumstances, with new challenges with the business loans and remote working. But I wondered whether Barry could maybe tell us if he's now satisfied that this is being addressed, or it will be addressed within a time scale. I know Steve has set up this panel to address various things, but obviously with the pressure on staff, are we in a position to actually achieve this now?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor. So in relation to the bad debt provision, one of the challenges that the council has is that there is a significant amount of historical information that's held within your financial ledger. So actually what you're doing is you're bringing forward balances from many years ago, and then having to cancel those out in preparing the financial statements. One of the issues that we found, and that has led to some of the additional work that's been required, so that we could actually get a real population that we're then able to sample test from, to make sure that we're not testing stuff that's subsequently been cancelled out. In relation to this item, this uncorrected item, one could argue that the council is being prudent, because what it's doing is it's including a bad debt provision, which it doesn't have the evidence anymore to be able to support. And again, that probably relates to very historical debts that may now have either been written off or may even have been settled. So our review and our question to the council is, if you're unable to substantiate it, then you shouldn't be making that provision. But more properly, what you need to do is make sure that you've got a robust process in place, so you know which debts are outstanding, so you're able to then calculate a proper bad debt provision at the end of the year.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Thanks, Chair. What I'm trying to set in my own mind is whether or not we actually have a bad debt there or not, and maybe I'm going to be told that we don't know yet. But possibly Steve could comment on it.
Yeah, happy to, Councillor Mann. I need to be fully satisfied with that balance before I can make a call on it. That's why I've asked for some further work to be done. And once we fully understand what the balance relates to, then I will make a decision, and we will put this ready for the audit of the accounts next year.
So do we have any idea how this has originated, or is it lost in the mists of time or figures or whatever? You know?
What we do know, Councillor Mann, is to do with housing benefit overpayments. If we do write this back at some point in the future, then it will actually be of benefit to the council that we write it back. As Barry said, you could argue we're being perhaps overly prudent on this one, but I need to be satisfied as Section 151 officer that that matter has been looked into in detail, and then I will make that call.
So it is possible that we either overpaid or underpaid housing benefits at some time in the past, Steve, is that right?
Correct. And as I said, this piece of work I'll be asking people to do will put me in a position where I can make that decision.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Who's next, please, Nigel?
Councillor Miles.
Brenda.
Thank you. I've got a number of questions, but my first question was in relation to Exhibit 14 on page 48 and Exhibit 15 on page 49. There are two comments there which are very similar. The first one says a listing of debtor balances on a transactional basis at the 31st of March 2020 could not be provided for audit. And then the second one is about creditors. A listing of creditor balances on a transactional basis could not be provided for audit. I'm concerned that we couldn't provide information that you required to carry out the audit. I just wondered if I could have an explanation as to why we weren't able to produce the information. Was it COVID related, or is it a longer term issue?
Chair, through you, could I ask, I'd like Andrew Southcombe to come in and respond to that question, please.
Andrew.
Okay, hello. Yeah, I think the issue is around the fact that it's the council tax, NNDR, housing benefit systems. What tends to happen is that the prior year debtor or creditor, depending on the position in that system at the end of the year, is retained and only in the year's movement is passed through. But all the transactional information is included in the third-party systems. So where Barry is saying that there's no transactional information, he's quite correct that there's no transactional information in the balance sheet, but all the transactional information is held in the third-party systems. I hope that answers your question.
I guess to some extent it is telling me the information is there, but it wasn't able to be extracted then for audit purposes. Is that what we're saying?
All the information was provided to the auditors from the third-party systems. So they would have had reports from the council tax system, the NNDR system and the benefit system.
Chair, if I may, can I ask Grace to contribute to clarify?
Thanks, Barry. Yes, so when we request the debtor and creditor listings at year end, we would expect the balances that are in the balance sheet to be set out on a transactional basis. So one line is one debtor, one creditor. In this case, because there's a lot of opening balance data being pulled through on the ledger, which isn't subsequently reversed out at the start of each year and reviewed, that is pulling through, which then doesn't net off against anything. So we have large balances sat there as opening balances in the ledger, which we then can't test as individual transactions. So this is where the recommendation has been raised, and it has been raised in prior years as well. So it's done on a transactional basis, so we can then sample, so there isn't just blocks of historic data being rolled forward. So ideally it should be assessed on the 1st of April of each financial year, and then the debtors and creditors assessed against that on a rolling programme throughout the year to then reach the balance sheet figure at the year end.
Okay. The answer's getting a little bit technical for me. However,
Steve, would you like to come in?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just to say that we have responded positively to those recommendations that are being discussed. And again, the work that I'll be leading through the project team, we will be looking to make improvements in these areas in line with the recommendations that have been made.
Okay, Brenda, thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks. That's what I was just going to say, is that I note that you know, it is agreed that it needs to be looked at, so that's fine. But the explanation was getting a little bit technical, but thanks for them anyway.
Would you like to carry on with your other questions, please?
Yeah, my next question then.
Chair, could I ask on that one, if you don't mind?
Oh, yeah.
Colin?
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify in my own mind whether or not the work that Steve and his team are doing will clarify whether or not that 4.73 million is actually valid. Is that what we're being told?
Well, just to clarify, what we've agreed to do is to look at the way that we actually process these debtors and creditors. So hopefully, when the auditors are looking at these transactions next year, it'll be in a more understandable format. We've reversed out any old balances, and obviously any new balances that are reinstated, we would be able to provide the evidence to support all of those balances. So I will be making sure, Councillor Mann, that our processes are reviewed to make sure that we satisfy those recommendations.
Diolch, Steve. Diolch, Chair.
Thank you. Brenda, carry on, please.
Thanks. So my next question was on page 56, and it's matter arising 15, IT general controls. And I can see there that the progress against the recommendations set out in the auditor's report will be monitored by the Council's digital leadership group. I just wanted to get an understanding of who is a member of the Council's digital leadership group, and ultimately where do they report to? I guess they don't come back to audit committee, so I'm just interested in the organisational structure that ensure that this recommendation is followed through.
Stephen?
I will probably ask Ed to come in on the digital leadership group in terms of the membership, but we can make a copy of that audit report available to the audit committee if you'd like to see it. And what I suggest may be of use is if at some future meeting we bring a report into the audit committee setting up what the recommendations were and the progress that has been made. So I'm happy to arrange for that to be put on the forward work programme if that is what members would like.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I'm looking for, is just to make sure that is reported back to someone, and if it comes back to us, I'm happy with that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, just before you move on, would you like me to clarify the membership of the digital leadership group as well, even though, Councillor Miles, I believe you've had your question answered? Yeah,
no, I'd still be interested to know who's in it.
Okay, well, it's a group that I have the pleasure of chairing. It's cross-departmental representation from heads of service, and it's also attended by previously Councillor Colin Gordon in his role as cabinet member, subsequently will now be Councillor Leonard Stenner.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Okay, now you've got 2 more questions.
Yeah. Okay, so my next question, moving on to page 58, concerns, and it's a similar sort of question, it concerns sort of governance issues. This is the one about the monitoring officer having failed to make a declaration of interest as at the 31st of March. So I wondered, really, who's responsible for collating and making sure that everyone has made the appropriate declarations of related party interests, and I wondered actually, does the responsibility actually rest within the monitoring officer's department, or is it elsewhere? I'm wondering about the circumstances by which this issue arose.
Yeah, in terms of the preparation of the accounts, we do send these forms out corporately from the corporate accountancy team, and we do chase up where we haven't received responses. Unfortunately, on this occasion, there was a response outstanding from the head of legal, but we do now have that declaration completed and on file. And what we'll do in future is make sure that we do follow up regularly through the audit process to make sure that we get all those declarations well in advance of the audit of accounts. Well, starting actually, we need to make sure in future we get them before the audit actually starts. I think, again, I'm not going to make excuses for this. It's perhaps down again to the remote way of working. It was just an oversight. But again, through the group that I'm chairing, I will make sure we address this moving forward. And, you know, where we don't get responses, they are routinely followed up.
Okay. Shall I just do my last question?
Yes, please.
Then, which is kind of on a similar sort of theme. This one arises on page 61. And this time it's to do with the Treasury and Capital Accountant, and the fact that errors were creeping through into the accounts, the authority's capital accounts. Again, I note that, you know, this issue is going to be addressed, but I'm just kind of interested again to understand how did this arise? Does the Treasury Capital Accountant report to anyone? Should this error have really been picked up? Again, is it COVID related, or was there something else going on that led to this?
I'll come in on that one initially, Chair, if that's okay. I did mention earlier, and it's mentioned briefly in the auditor's report, we did lose a key member of staff in March. That was the Capital and Treasury Accountant who'd been with us for some time. We have appointed to the post, and as I said, we've got somebody who's on a very steep learning curve, and I think having been through the experience of the audit, that's probably in a perverse way been a positive experience, because clearly it's highlighted things that perhaps need to be improved in the role moving forward. So again, you know there's lots of responses to recommendations around the asset register, etc., and the capital. So again, I will be monitoring those very closely myself moving forward. And on a day-to-day basis, the person in that role would report to Andrew Southcombe, the Finance Manager for Corporate Accountancy.
Okay.
Chair, may I just make an observation on that point? So I think Steve's point is well made. The officer concerned took up the post only a very short time before the audit actually commenced, and we found that actually quite a lot of our queries were being dealt with by that individual. That individual worked incredibly hard to make sure that she did respond to our audit inquiries. So it would be wrong to say that we're placing any criticism on that individual officer. That's certainly not the case, and indeed they worked incredibly hard to make sure that they resolved all of our queries. So I just wanted to make sure that we do say positive things as well.
And Chair, can I support Barry's comments there, because the individual, as Barry said, has worked very, very hard, and this was a very, very steep learning curve for her.
Mm.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Can I ask a question? Margaret?
Just a second. Nigel, who's next, please?
Councillor Gale.
Oh, it is.
There we go.
Forgotten about. No, it's about us coming out of Europe and what the council are doing to either address it. Time's running out, as we all know. And the other thing that you've got a committee for this coming out of Europe, and I would like to know where you got the £1 million set aside for that. So I don't know what you'd spend it on. I haven't got a clue. But it's a potential mid-term financial implication. It's on page 11, I think, there were the £1 million to be financial implications that may arise. So could I ask where you get the £1 million from?
Steve, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, £1 million was approved by full council back, I think, in January 2019. So we did establish a reserve at that time of £1 million. Now, that sum hasn't been used to date, and it's being held just in case there are short-term financial implications that we have to deal with in the event of a no-deal Brexit. In terms of what we do internally, we've had a Brexit working group which has been established for some time, which is looking at all of the potential risks and mitigating actions that may be required. We have reinforced that recently by setting up a group under that, an operational group, which has got key officers from key service areas, which are looking at the detail and potential impacts on the ground. And on the strategic group, we have invited cross-party representation. So, for example, Councillor Mann sits on there, and recently Councillor Graham Simmons has also been invited. So that group is now meeting on a 2-weekly basis, and it will meet beyond the 31st of December, because whether we leave with a deal or without a deal, there will be implications that we'll need to monitor for some time.
June, you're on mute.
After this committee, will you?
Didn't catch some of that.
Will you be reporting back to this committee on meeting with the committee that has been set up?
Yes, that's bound to happen, June.
Thank you.
Nigel, who's next, please?
I'm on the list now.
Good.
It's alluding to what Grace has picked up on the report, in that there was quite a number of recommendations this year, many more than I've seen before. And I was just wondering at the time whether it alluded to the COVID problem or some other problem, but obviously Steve, I think, has answered that, in that COVID has part to do with it, but it's part to do with the change in personnel in the office, which has caused quite a problem. My concern is now is, do you think with the recommendations that are going to pile onto the work we've got for this year already, that things are going to get better?
What I can assure you, Nigel, is I give you my personal commitment to lead that project group and to make the necessary changes to drive those recommendations through. Clearly, it's in our interest to do that. And on a positive aspect of this, of course, hopefully moving forward, it will make future audits a lot more seamless than this one has been. So I'm taking this as a positive. We'll drive the changes forward. We'll make the improvements, and clearly we'll be assessed on that in the audit next year. So when we're having this discussion next year with the Audit Wales, because they'll be doing the audit next time, I'm very hopeful, obviously, that they'll be able to give you a very positive report in terms of the changes we've made.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And I have on my list now Graham and Colin, but I don't know which order, Nigel.
I think Graham's first and then Colin came in after, I think.
Okay. Graham, please.
Well, my first question relates to page 70, the pension liability, and it's a case of congratulations. It's a significant fall in the liability, about £115 million, give or take a couple of quid, and this is very satisfying. It's taken quite a long time to shine some light on this, but at last it seems to be being addressed. The downside, of course, is that even at where are we by? £540 million, it still leaves the council with a secondary payment in excess of £4,100,000. But nevertheless, it's a cause for congratulations. I then have a question. Sorry about it. My monitor won't switch very easily.
That's okay.
And that time, of course, it did. Yeah, I've got a question on page 72, if I may, please.
Carry on.
Sorry, can you hear me? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Future financial developments. As it says in the report, we've cut £103 million from services. And then in the last 3 years, we've also managed to underspend our revenue budgets by 31 million and our capital budgets by, I believe it was 90 million. I'm struggling with that one. You know, we cut in services and we're still managing to run under budget in certain departments, and what departments I don't know, but I would like to. And possibly Ms. Harris will give us some insight, and then I've got a question on page 123 and 164, if you don't mind, please.
Steve, can you come in on this question, please?
Yeah, happy to, Chair. In respect to the underspends, we do report those to Cabinet every year. So after the meeting, I will send a link to all Cabinet members of the outturn report that went to Cabinet on the 1st of July, and that provides a full explanation for the underspend position. So I'll ensure that that is sent after the meeting. In relation to capital, there are a number of reasons why we underspend each year. Very often it's because of slippage on schemes, and what that means is schemes get carried forward, either because they haven't been completed or because the full funding hasn't come in yet, and we're still putting the funding packages together for some of the schemes. But again, we do an outturn report on capital, and we will be scheduling that within the next couple of months to the Policy and Resources Scrutiny Committee, which Councillor Simmons, you now sit on. So obviously there'll be ample opportunity then for you to ask questions on the detailed content of that report.
Thank you.
My next question, I should have looked up in the dictionary, but I didn't. What is an amortised cost, please? It's a word I've never heard before.
Well, I certainly can't answer that with you, Graham.
I don't feel so bad, Margaret.
Again, I'd like, as Andrew has joined us today, perhaps Andrew would like to comment on that one as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, the amortised cost is inclusive of interest costs.
I'm sorry, could I say that again, please?
The amortised cost is the cost inclusive of interest costs.
Right, so it's say £100 at 10% interest at the end of every year?
Yeah.
Thank you. And I believe I have a quick one now on 168, if I may, please.
Go on then.
No, I'm trying to find it. I've lost my highlighter for some reason. Oh yeah, the Cardiff City region. As you can see there from the table, our cost is virtually doubled since last year. And well, this is a question for Steve, if you don't mind, please. Could you send me a list of benefit projects that is receiving as a member of this group, please? And I'll leave it there if you don't mind, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll discuss that with relevant officers, and we'll respond to Councillor Simmons.
Thank you. Colin Mann.
Thanks, Chair. Trying to find the mute button. It's back to a previous discussion in a way, but I'm going back to page 48. Exhibition 14. It's about assumptions again in and out of the accounts, and I'm reading there's what, 9.5 million of historical debtor balances coming in. You know, as we all know, that's not far off the sort of value of the general fund quite often. So it's not a small amount of money. And again, I'm assuming for the moment, Steve, that this is part of your ongoing investigation with a group that you set up. But you know, it's a heck of a lot of money, and either we are owed that money or we're not. And how sure are we, if at all, that that money is owed, and have we any idea where, you know, who's owing it, etc., etc.?
Yeah, firstly, Councillor Mann, I wouldn't refer to this as an investigation. It's a project team that's going to address the recommendations. Okay. But yes, you're right. At the end of the day, there are balances there with a value of 9.5 million. They need to be reviewed in detail. They need to be evidenced. I'm sure in many cases that will be the outcome, but clearly anything that we're not able to evidence, then we should actually write them back out of the accounts. So yes, the project team will be looking closely at those balances.
Sorry,
Councillor Mann, did Grace want to come in?
Yes, I was just going to say that we have tested those opening balances of that figure within a material amount, and we are happy that they have been evidenced. So we're not saying that those don't exist. It's just a recommendation of the way they're presented and that they're considered each year. So we have tested those, and they are materially correct.
Back to Steve for the moment, Chair. You know, with all the pressures that we've already discussed, how confident are you that this can be sorted? Because again, I read that it's been an item as per the other one in a number of audit reports up to now.
Yeah, and that's the reason, Councillor Mann, I want to project manage it this year. We can get a number of people involved, and we can spread the workload. So rather than just leave it to be dealt with by a particular team, I do want to pull a number of staff together so we can spread the workload and make sure that we can make progress against the recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Nigel, are there any more questions, please?
No, no more questions.
No more questions. Okay, can we go to the recommendations then? The recommendations on 3 is, do you want to take them on block or one at a time?
Let's just have a look at them again and remind ourselves of all of them.
Yes, of course. Steve, what you were going to say?
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to suggest for the ease of voting, if you read the recommendations out, and then I would suggest you vote on block.
Okay. The recommendations are 311 is to receive and comment upon the external auditors and audit of audit accounts. 312 is note the management's responses to the auditor's recommendations arising from the 2019-20 financial audit work. Recommendation 313 is to recommend to Council that the 2019-20 audited financial accounts attached as Appendix 2 are approved as at its meeting on the 24th of November 2020. Okay.
My hand is up, Chair.
Oh, Michael.
Yeah. Yes, I'd like to move the recommendations at 3.1 as you've just read out.
Thank you very much. Can I please have a seconder? No?
I'll second, Margaret.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you very much. Right, we'll go to the... Do we need to vote on this?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, Chair, I think the form is now open in the chat.
Ah, that's it. I couldn't find it. There we go. Here we go. It's all in there. If you could do the necessary, please.
Can I vote that Nigel Yates is in favour as a verbal vote, please?
That's lovely. Thank you, Nigel. That's 9 responses. And that's the same as before, so that's great. Thank you ever so much, everyone. That concludes the meeting. Thank you all for your attendance, and I declare the meeting closed.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.